If you've been following my channel, you'll know that tube radios are a great passion of mine, and that's what I focus primarily on. However, I have other passions, and one of them is for a particular type of transistor radio that came out in the late 60s, 70s, a little bit into the transistor era after the initial transistorization happened, and before everything became just plastic and cheap. Some of the manufacturers of really high quality radios went into producing some exceptional quality transistor radios as well. And I sort of divide them into two categories. One of them is the world receiver. And I've done a few of those. I did the Philips Antoinette. I did the various Grundig satellite series, which were amazing world receivers. I did the Braun T1000, which was, again, a world receiver built to an amazing standard. And then there are these other radios which weren't labeled or sold as world receivers, but as sort of luxury items. And I can only describe them as luxury items because the quality that went into them is astounding. I've shown a restoration of a Nordmende Transit TS before. Incredible quality, incredible detail, very, very well designed and very, very well built. And that's just one of those that I consider to be not really world receivers, but they do stand out. And I'm absolutely fascinated by them. And this is the subject of the project today. This is a BLAUPUNKT Derby from 1972-74, and I really think this thing looks beautiful. This is the sort of device that you can put anywhere today and it looks in place. A little bit like the Braun T1000s and so on that actually still look modern. And this particular one, I just fell in love with it when I saw it. It's one of a number of little radios that I bought at one point after the Nordmende Transitor project. And this has been waiting for some time to be worked on. But I've had other things on my plate, so left it till now. But let's have a closer look at this guy. The actual condition of this radio is pretty good. It's pretty good. There's nothing wrong with the front. There's a little bit of a ding here. But I may change this color. It looks like this can be sprayed on. And my daughter's made a special request. She wants this for her and she wants a particular color, so I'll have to think about that. But as far as the top's concerned, we've got a damaged antenna here. You can see that. And it doesn't come out. Stuck. We've got an on-off switch, volume control, and then we've got the tape in, external in, long wave, medium wave, short wave, and FM. This is the tuning, and it is moving. I can see that there. And this, what is this? It's going round and round. This could be a fine tuning. We'll test it and see. There are 4 screws on here. Nothing else here. What have we got here? Just some screw, nothing at the back. And on the side we've got external speaker, or headphone out rather, the tape in, tape out, and 220 volts input. Okay, so there's no DC supply for this, except of course on the battery compartment. And here's the actual model number. There are quite a few of these models. This is the 7652450. And this I actually had to put a bit of WD-40 because these things were really stuck. So I've looked inside here. There's nothing wrong with the battery compartment. So no batteries have gone awry here. And it looks like we can supply this with, what is it, 6 volts, 6 batteries, so 9 volts. Okay. So I'm going to try and supply it and see if we get anything. I've set my bench supply to 9 volts with 100 milliamp current limit. I'm not sure what condition this will be in, so let's give it a try. It's on FM. It's making some noise. It's picking something up, but very, very faint. Let me put an antenna on here. See if we hear anything. Well, it's picking up the stations I expect, but it's very, very low. I can hardly hear it. Let me try the shortwave on the mini whip. This is pretty stiff. Nothing. Medium wave. Not much. But the important thing is I can hear it. Take the microphone closer. You can hear it. You can hear it, but it's extremely dim. Very low level. So what do I think is wrong with this thing? Well, I think the audio is fine. And I think this thing has got a push-pull section at the front, or at the end rather, the amplifier. I've got the schematic for this. And I believe that there are two transistors, both of them PNPs. This thing is I believe, I've got to check that, but the ground is positive and everything else is negative below that. So we may find that, and so that it's got a capacitor, a coupling capacitor between a DC blocking capacitor between the output and the speaker. So that might be gone. I'm going to try sort that out first, and then I'll look at the power in and see what we're getting. I won't be using this thing on batteries, I'm sure. Okay, let me open this up. All right, this is out. Now this seems to have had a sticky tape at the bottom and it was just stuck. I can see remnants of the tape. Can remove that. And that's in good shape, so we'll put that aside. And I can see the remnants of the tape all over here. I'll have to remove that. Here's bits of it. How does the rest come out? These guys seem to come off, these little rubbers. Some of them do. How does this thing come out? Oh, there there's another screw down here. And on the other side as well. Nearly forgot about that. And there's another one down here. Well, that took quite a lot of searching, but I think I've sorted it out. There's these clips on here. There's this rail on here, and there, and they've got these indents over here, which you're supposed to sort of push in or something. I think it just forces in there. I think it was stuck for some reason, and it probably shouldn't be. They've got some tape here, which is just to make it fit tighter. So I started pushing it, and then suddenly it released. So here we are. This is what we're looking at. And the messed up antenna is pretty obvious there. Other than that, well, this foam just comes off. It's just there to protect this from the side of the radio, I presume. Boy, this reminds me so much of the Antoinette. When I look at the soldering, everything is very tight together and probably very fragile. 2 fuses on here. This will have to do with the external power supply. This thing is very compact, very crammed actually. There's a lot of stuff in here. Let's have a look at the other side. Well, maybe not. Doesn't look too bad, does it? Oh, I can see some damaged capacitors as expected. Some of those electrolytics will probably be the cause of the problem. I've got to be careful. There's a lot of very fine wires going there from the ferrite antenna. The speaker's in perfect condition. There's the little transformer at the bottom. So to get to the power supply, actually the power supply will be on there, so I'll just remove the speaker. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look for that coupling capacitor, the DC blocking capacitor to the speaker, and I'm going to try a Shango trick, which is just put a big capacitor across it, see if we get better audio and see if that's the main problem. But I will be replacing the other electrolytics as well because they have been here for a long time and they're very low voltage. The problem with these caps, in those days these things were expensive, so they put in capacitors that are very close to the supply voltage. I can see 16 volts over there, 10 volts over here. These things are very close to the supply voltage, which means that they don't have much tolerance. Obviously the ones I'll replace with now will be much better, probably much smaller as well. But let me try that first trick. Well, I tried the Shango trick, which is to short out the capacitors. I've got a non-polarized capacitor here. Nothing changed, but I'm going to change the capacitors first anyway. And then I'll be checking some, trying to follow the signals and see where it's here. I can hear it. And I'll just follow the signals, probably with a signal tracer, and see where it is that it's really, really low. I've got a feeling it might be one of the transistors, probably the preamp stage transistors, but we'll find out. Listen to this.
São 6 os casos na Madeira que constam nas denúncias validadas pela Comissão Independente para o Estudo de Abusos Sexuais.
This thing has some amazing sound.
Destes 6 casos, 4 dizem
That's
respeito a
FM.
abusos.
Let's try shortwave. This tuning is very stiff. And this is a fine tuning. It's a little capacitor probably in parallel with the tuning cap or the oscillator section of the tuning cap. But just as well, it does have fine tuning, because this tuning on a full band is very, very difficult. It's very sensitive. You just twist a little bit and it's off the station. So you then bring it in with the fine tuning. I think this is great, and I think this thing is working well. Now, what did I do? Well, I told you that I used this little capacitor across the other caps. Nothing happened, but I still replaced a few of them, and I'm going to replace a few more. These guys look really grotty. I haven't even tested them, but I want to get them out and see what happens. And then I started poking with my finger, and I realized there was a section here that suddenly went alive, and I started putting this across it, and at a particular point, it came back, and it was this switch that was dirty. This is the phono or external auxiliary input switch, and obviously that contact was dirty, so I cleaned those switches up. Should have done that first, really, but I wanted to change the caps anyway. And that means that when I pushed FM or any of the stations, it wasn't releasing from the external input one, and that's why this thing was cutting out the audio. So again, the capacitor trick worked, but in a different way to that which I expected. Anyway, what have I got to do now? Well, I've got a few more capacitors to do. I've done the main ones over there for the supply, and I think that will affect the mains rectification and filtering. I haven't tried the mains yet, but I will do. I'm sure that with those caps in there, there was a lot of hum. One of those, at least, is the one that couples the output to the speaker. So I'm glad I changed that. There are a few others here that are supply filtering, like that one there. I'll be replacing those as well. Maybe even some of the small ones, although they are kind of difficult to get to. But I'll look at that, and when I get back to you, I think I'll have this thing just about done and we can test it. I'll be testing it before putting it into the cabinet, of course. But one thing I do need to do definitely is I need to release this tuning. This thing is very tight, and I think it needs lubrication on all those moving parts because it is really, really tight. So let me get cracking. Okay, folks, here we go. I've got the mains power connected. No hum.
Envelope financeiro para as autarquias. Isto durante a apresentação pública do Plano Municipal de Saúde.
Of course, the rest has to do with the antenna. Now you'll see that I've got the antenna sorted, and what I did was I couldn't get this thing out. I actually removed the bottom, and I didn't have a spare antenna, but what I did have, well, I had spare antenna, but I didn't have one that had the right height here and that connected at the bottom. So I actually took this pin off. I got rid of the old base. See that? You can actually push the pin out. And I did the same with another antenna that I had here. And now I've got my antenna back. And it seems to be working okay. And I can actually do this if I want to listen to FM. Picks up quite a lot better with the external antenna that I have here. And it works extremely well. And it actually has a very, very good sound. And I did a few other things. I'm going to remove the power here because there is a fuse at the back that has access to your mains. So if you touch it, you will not be happy. So what else did I do? Well, I cleaned it up. All the plastics got cleaned up. The top got properly cleaned up. There's not much to clean. It was actually in pretty good shape, so it wasn't difficult or anything like that. I cleaned the switches again. You've got to do this a couple of times because the first time you spray contact cleaner in there, it loosens the dirt. Then you've got to leave it for a few hours, come back, do it again, probably leave it again, come back, do it again, just to make sure that you get that it washes away, that it doesn't just, loosen it and then dry up again. They're the fuses I'm talking about. One of them is from the mains coming in through there. So if you touch that, you're going to get hurt. The other one is actually on the center tap of the secondary, so that's already low voltage, but I don't even really know which is which. I had to make a few decisions about what to do here, because if you look at this this spells trouble. This kind of board is fairly old and it's fairly sensitive, and I noticed that when I removed the capacitors. What I had to do was I used a solder sucker gently, not one of the really strong ones, and then I used desoldering braid so that you don't actually, put any force on the contacts. Also, the soldering iron was down to 300 degrees Celsius, so not as hot as I normally use it. What I did notice here is that they use an enormous amount of glue. There's a lot of glue all over the place, and I noticed that on the inside as well. In fact, one of the capacitors over here, one of those over there, was very difficult to remove because I had to loosen. I'm just showing you this because it's done. There's no point me going to much detail when I've already done it. But I took the speaker out and I had to remove this. You loosen a screw here and you pull it up because this capacitor is right underneath. And you don't have to desolder these transistors or anything. These are the two output transistors, which seem to be perfectly fine. And then I checked around, saw the other capacitors, tried to measure the ESR from the underside. They seemed okay. The main ones have been changed, the ones that are important here. And as you can see, it's working perfectly fine. I did contemplate trying an alignment, but you know what? These guys are waxed in, and there's always this idea that you're going to improve something. You always forget that when you mess with something that is as tight as this, the chance of repairing or improving is probably lower than the chance of damaging more. So if you've got a radio that works well, and let's face it, this guy works extremely well on FM. And the reason I'm focusing on FM or mentioning FM is because, quite honestly, in my opinion, FM is the only thing this thing is useful for as it stands. One other thing I did, I loosened all that. So it's all moving very freely now. There was a little bit of dirt on those pulleys there and on here. So clean that up. It's all cleaned up. It's all working well. But let me show you the problem here. I've got the mains in again. So we've got FM. Okay. Now watch what happens when I put it on medium wave. I get the local station, but I get none of the Canary Island stations, which I usually get very, very easily on these on medium wave here. And last night I tried long wave, and again I got nothing on here, whereas I'm quite accustomed to receiving about 4 stations on long wave. This is with the mini whip, of course. I've got the mini whip connected over there. By itself, with a ferrite antenna, I get nothing except the local station on all the radios I do on this bench. So with the mini whip, that works. Now, if I go to medium wave, again, medium wave, watch what happens if I touch the antenna. It doesn't really improve, which is a problem because all the other guys that I work on have got an external car antenna. And that means that if I use the mini whip and connect it into that, I can use the mini whip for shortwave, long wave, and medium wave. And quite honestly, on medium wave and long wave, the mini whip is absolutely magical. It really does transform everything. It makes it come back to life like you wouldn't believe, because ferrite antenna here for me works very poorly, okay? If you live in an urban area and you get a lot of local AM stations, you're probably fine with that, and it'll probably be actually a quieter signal, less noise, but in my case, it's useless. Now, I've checked the schematic on this, and both for long wave and short wave, when you push it out of long wave or short wave, it actually shorts the respective part of the antenna to ground. So I can't even connect this to a particular point here, because the minute I change it over, that will have been shorted to ground. So I can't use the external antenna on the AM bands, or rather I should say on long wave and medium wave. On short wave, I can. Listen to this. And it's during the day, so I don't get much. But I want to show you something else. I've just got the mini whip connected to the antenna up here. There is no external antenna socket on this place, but if I take the ground of the mini whip and I connect it to chassis ground, See that? Now, if I remove this, I can hardly hear it. So I actually need a ground for the antenna, and I don't have it, which means that when the cover is on, the only place I can really get to a ground on the antenna would be the socket, the ground of the headphone socket, which is really a bit of a bummer. So that's why I say this is really an FM radio. And that's it. Now, it is a very nice little FM radio, and I have some bad news for my daughter. Let me show you the cabinet. I did a bit of touching up, and you can probably still see traces of it. I tried with a very fine paintbrush just to touch up a couple of black dots that were on there. The rest was just cleaning. But the back, if you remember, it was all scratched up, and look at it now. I taped everything up and I spray painted it. There are a couple of marks on here. This is just dust, which is picked up in the meantime. I've got to just wipe the sides clean, and this thing is now the original color. Very close to the original, maybe just a little bit darker. And the reason I can't paint it whatever color she wants is because of these holes. Now, I suppose I could block that out and I could do a spray paint job on here and it would work perfectly well, but these holes, this thing does not come off. So these holes would be sprayed. And I don't know how I would avoid this being blotted with the same color. I like this black coming through. I think it's a feature. Inside here, you've got a grill on this section, but this part here is just the back. There's nothing there. You can't really just let it go through and replace what's at the back. There may be a way of removing this, but I think it's easier for me to tell her I can't. So the cabinet, this part is done, and it's going to stay like this. This is going to stay the original color. I've got a little bit more cleaning up to do. Then I'm going to put that in here. And then tonight, when shortwave comes alive, I'm going to give you a demo of just exactly how good shortwave is on this thing. As I said, it's an FM radio, and if you can find a way to connect an external antenna like the mini whip, you'd have to use the ground of the audio plug there or some other ground. This has got very little metal coming out to the outside, so other than the antenna, which is not ground, obviously, you need another ground. But if you can do that, then you can actually pick up pretty well on shortwave. And of course, with the fine-tuning, it actually makes working or picking up shortwave on this radio a lot easier. And as far as I've been able to discern, this only works for shortwave, the fine-tuning. So I'm going to put all that back, and I'll come back and give you a final demo. Let's give this thing a try on shortwave. It's evening. I've got the mini whip in there. I've got the mini whip connected to the ground of the socket. So let's see what we've got.
الله بأمره إن الله على كل شيء قدير. حسدا إعراب حسدا مفعول لأجل. 1人1号已经成为现实。Un poco las y la mayor parte de las aulas está en Makati. Makati es la zona de... ...215个示范虚拟访问。服务学生的权利。我清楚。以社会教育内涵制为主线，从维度提出具体策略。El tema de la conectividad es fundamental. Conectividad, digo, en 5G, So for the vulnerable population, including the制造都需要 我们去创新，去探索。
Movement of people and places with me, Mihail. I devoted the first part of today's Siempre me ha llamado la atención esa experiencia que tienen los chinos de
population, especially the adults, will not.
Let me show you what I found out about medium wave. If I put it on medium wave, I can get about 2 stations, I think. Just hear that. And of course, it's sort of directional. Now watch what happens when I do this.
Luego decide, venga, va.
Venga, va.
La semana que viene Ferín a Madrid por el tema de...
¿El obrero?
Muere por un accidente fortuito.
Listen to that. That sounds like it's just next door, and this is Canary Islands that we're listening to. I can put this underneath. All this is a few turns of wire, and I've got the mini whip connected on there. I'll put it underneath. In fact, this is how some of these improvement antennas are sold. It's amazing. That's a way of getting the mini whip to work with that ferrite antenna in there, because otherwise it's quite useless. Let me try long wave. Same story. This is actually Radio 4 in the UK. You can just get it. And that's it, folks. That just shows you what you can do with this little guy. Although, as I said, it is set up mostly for ferrite antenna use. And of course, the little rod up there that you can use for shortwave, I suppose, and FM. Now, FM, it's brilliant. It sounds great. It sounds actually quite rich for a little radio this size. And then, of course, the AM bands, well, medium wave and long wave, you can use that, or otherwise just forget about it. There isn't that much available on there anyway, so you're not losing much. But I'll tell you what, I really like this thing. It turned out magnificently. I really, really like it. Look at this thing. It is so sexy. It is so sexy. I like it. And I'm glad I did it, because now I've got another little jewel to add to the collection. And this collection is going to grow. It's it's actually easier to grow this one, because the the devices are smaller than those massive tube radios, which were driving my wife crazy. But yeah, this is another one. I've got a few more different brands, different models. I've got a SABA. I've got some more Grundigs. I've got some more Nordmendes. And as we go along, interspersed with the tube radio restoration projects, I like to do one of these and give you guys something else to look at. Anyway, that's going to be it for today. And I want to thank you for your company. Hope you've enjoyed that. If you have, click like, share, subscribe, and all that jazz. If you want to support the channel directly, you can do so on Patreon and PayPal. Links are in the description below. And so thanks for watching. Bye for now, and stay safe.